Alright gang, now that we are writing more complex, more comprehensive code, it's finally time that we've graduated above and beyond the command line interpreter and we moved into setting up our own IDE or Integrated Development Environment. And here's how you do that in a handful of steps. Step 1, let's move over to Visual Studio Code's website found at code.visualstudio.com and we're going to download the flavor of our choice. Pick your operating system, pick your poison. If you are a Windows user, if you use a user installation installer, you will not need to put in administrative rights. You can do this if you're working from a work computer or you don't have the admin password for that particular machine. Otherwise, you can just use the system installer. That's the only caveat to that. So you're going to download your particular flavor for your OS, and then assuming you've installed Python, which you should have already, you're going to then begin the installer. The installer is your standard fare, nothing really different than anything else you've seen before. Obligatory EULA agreement, go for that. Default installation is typically okay. It's your choice whether you want to start menu or not. And the only thing you're going to really make sure that you want is to include this installer in your path. It's going to make setting up your IDE much simpler in the long run. So just go ahead, make sure that one's clicked. Me particularly, I like to add the open with code in the context menu. So if you want to do that, go ahead and do those. I also prefer to have it on my desktop as well or on the menu bar. It's up to you. And Shazam. We're done with the hardest step of this entire process, which wasn't even that hard. You're welcome. Alright, when loading up your software the first time, you're going to see this big, scary looking screen. Let's not worry too much. What I do want to do is give you a quick run through on some of the facets that you're going to want to pay attention to. So first thing, this bar right here, this little command bar, this is where all the fun stuff happens. If you open it up, you'll see that it expands. The first icon is your Explorer, where you can create files or navigate your directory structure. The magnifying glass, of course, an obligatory search feature. This is important. Source control is if you're looking at branching different projects. We'll get more into this in later weeks of this course. Don't worry about it too much. This last one is the debugger. We're not going to be getting into too much complexity where we'll be needing a debugger until later, but we'll have a specialized tool for that. And then of course, the bread and butter is extensions. This is where you get to make your IDE specialized, give it some more pop, some more flavor, and help it with your code writing experience. But before we do any of that, I'd like to show you some of the things that I like to do as soon as I start up Visual Studio Code. First things first, I am completely untrusting by nature, so I go into Preferences, into Settings, and I do a quick search for telemetry. While I am appreciative of free code writing software, I do not want to report anything back to any company about my usage or my ongoings, so the first thing I do is I turn off telemetry settings. That's just me. Do with it what you will. I'm sure the makers of this software would appreciate your statistics, but that's just not my jazz. Here's a good pro tip for students in this class. We typically engage our projects and all of our learning base curriculum off of the week system. So you can start by working on your current week. Let's go with week 6. How about that? So here's where that Explorer context is extremely helpful. Instead of opening up your code or your IDE and then starting your project, a simpler way to do that would be to right-click on your folder, click Open with Code, and now your project workspace is already a focal point in the File Explorer. So from here, all we need to do is create a new file. Let's call this week06.py because this is a Python script. And we are already ready to rock. You'll notice the first thing it does is ask us if we want to install recommended extensions. Well, let's take a look. The default Python extension, MS Python, is absolutely a showstopper, so definitely get that. while we're at it, let me show you some of the ones that I also think are pretty incredible. You can install multiple extensions synchronously, and it's not going to be an issue. All right, so one that you'll see me frequently use in my videos, which I think you should invest some time into, is AREPL. It's a real-time scratchpad for Python. I think you'll get a lot of use out of this. I particularly like this one because you don't have to go through the compilation or running process to actually see the output or the variable status or values of your code. As long as you're typing and it's not specific types of objects, you'll be able to get real-time feedback on exactly what your code is doing as you're doing it. Huge help, saves a lot of time, and definitely saves in the troubleshooting process. Okay, so additionally in the extensions, I'd like you to consider the Python docstring generator. Easiest way to do this is just make sure that you're typing Python up in the search bar, and it'll automatically bring up the most popular extensions for Python. Now you might be tempted to grab some of the more popular ones that you see, like auto indentation, the extensions, some of the auto pep features. These are all great and fantastic tools to help you as a developer. I say this with a word of warning and sprinkled with caution. It's better to suffer through the language to learn the syntax the difficult way, with just getting your reps in before relying on these extensions, and actually having a more fundamental understanding of the language than going straight into extension crazy. We'll get into the point where we can build our repertoire, get our toolbox more fleshed out with some of these really cool extensions, and I'll explain how they interact with your code and how your development cycle is improved by them. But let's start with some of the basic stuff. So we'll go with docstring generation because I'm going to want you to create some authorship tags in there so that you can better comment your code. And then as the class progresses for the last half of the class, we'll get into some more of these extensions, and I'll show you some cool stuff that other developers are putting forward for us. All right, so all that to be said, if you have clicked install on those extensions that I suggested, we can now close out of Visual Studio Code. We can now reopen code, and you should see that you're greeted with your new blank file. I'm going to get the Explorer out of the way, and just to give you a demonstration of the AREPL extension, let's write some pretty quick code here. We're going to create a variable, and we're going to give it a value. And you can see that as we type in real time, AREPL is going to help us out. It also gives us some assistance with print statements, our standard output. So you can see here that I've tried to print the value from avar, and it's doing exactly what it needs to. It also will give us some pointers if we need linting for errors. For example, I misspelled print here, and it's telling me line 6 that rent is not defined, and it's basically saying, dummy, I think what you meant to say was print, which is true. All right. I hope you found that helpful. I hope this helps you get your IDE set up quicker without having to go through some YouTube videos, and you can follow along better in the class. We're going to be using this environment for the rest of the class as we get into more complex code, and as I start giving you assignments based on Python scripts. The easiest way to use those and complete those is to just load them up in your IDE and follow the instructions that I will comment directly into the code for you. All right, well, I will see you in class. Thanks, everyone.